Welcome back to another episode of the Majorvation Podcast, where we talk about all things inspirational, aspirational, and of course, majorvational. Today's guest is a man forged in the fires of real world performance, discipline, and leadership, not just in theory. From top producing Wall Street broker to combat tested law enforcement operator in narcotics, SWAT, and the DEA task forces, he's lived at the edge of pressure and purpose. After more than 18 years serving in law enforcement, training officers, leading teams, and mastering combat certainty, he left the badge to pursue a larger mission to redefine strength, purpose, and leadership for the modern era. He's a best-selling author, an international keynote speaker, the founder of Man of War, and the host of one of the world's most influential personal development podcasts, heard by millions. His work builds not just better leaders, but men equipped with discipline, conviction, and legacy-driven purpose. Rafa Conde, welcome to the Majorvation Podcast.
Wow, that has to be one of the most greatest intros of all time right there, man. I want to record that and put it in my little deck so I can hear it over and over again. Thank you, man. Very kind. It's an honor to be here, brother.
No, absolutely. It's an honor to have some of your time to kind of share and just hopefully enlighten some of the people that I hope that comes across this video. So let's just go to the mindset of, before we go backwards, I just want to start right on the mindset of things. If you look at the climate of where we are now in this world, when it comes to masculinity, when it comes to men, when it comes to the perspective or perception of success, in your opinion, why do you think there are so many men, or because you make some really great videos that show the comparisons of what a man should do or what a man shouldn't do under certain pressure and certain circumstances? Why have you taken the mantle or the flag to kind of educate people or wake people up when it comes to strength, the strength of a man? Why is that important to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it all starts in the police academy. I was, let's see, a little bit over a decade teaching in the police academy. And one day, me and a couple of other instructors started to talk and say, hey, you know what we notice here? The girls, they're stronger than the men coming through. Men just didn't have that warrior spirit, that drive. And keep in mind, I mean, we were teaching these individuals, right, men and women, to survive in the streets. And we just saw much more fight in women that we were seeing in men. So one of the guys says, hey, man, maybe you should start a podcast and so on. So what I did is I thought about it and I go, well, maybe I can start talking about something that I felt very strong about, which was the warrior spirit, right? The warrior mind, the warrior philosophies, the warrior cultures. That's something that I've studied for, my gosh, decades and decades. So I started talking about that and how it linked up to masculinity. The next thing I know, the podcast takes off. I get a bunch of emails, bunch of people reaching out to me, and I guess they're liking what I am saying, and they're it's kind of resonating in there, and it's hitting a nerve to many. So man, from one thing to another, from the podcast, and I got together with a friend of mine. We started throwing it out there and say, hey, men need a rite of passage. They need a rite of passage, something that they can accomplish at a later age in life, right? When we're young, especially nowadays, kids think sports are a rite of passage. They may be. There's certain elements, but once you start getting a little bit older in your late 20s and 30s, most men don't have a rite of passage. Now, here we go. All of a sudden, I started figuring out how I would envision a program that can break men down and build them back up. And we finally designed something. I had literally, man, I was in law enforcement at that time. It was, when I tell you, I was financially not in a great position, and I started throwing $5 here. I went out there, $5 there. I started to put some videos together. I asked some friends to come together to let's shoot something, film something. I still have the video out there. Let's shoot something that looks something similar to what I want to do. We all got together in the morning, went to the beach, started doing some log carrying, some water exercises, some running. We had a drone up. I remember my son came and helped us film it. I put that video together and put some money behind it. Uh, After a few $100, I was about to shut the light off, and I said, "Let me put some more money behind it, a few more hundred, whatever." And well, we had the first person step in and actually buy the first bang, and that person paid in full. I took every penny and I threw it into ads. The next thing from there, it took off. And now we are what? This is 2000, that was 2017. So we're 9 years into this. And all I can tell you is that every morning I get up with a fire in my gut and I believe that I'm doing God's work. I shifted my mission from being a police officer to leading men, helping men execute at the highest of levels, and more importantly, giving that sense of service to men because a lot of men don't have that and they need to, right? Serving for something greater than themselves. And here we are today, blessed, honored, and humbled without a doubt.
That's such a great story. So tell me, in the beginning part of what you were doing, so when you had this vision to partake upon this journey, and you wasn't financially at a good space, what were certain things beyond the first sale that kept you going, right? So even after, as you said, you were spent a few $100s already. And I think a lot of people need to hear this. My good friend, his name is Greg Reed. He wrote a book called 3 Feet from Gold. And we
Mhm.
kind of all know that philosophy. You stop only 3 feet from gold, and you give up and you give it to the next person. They take a
Mhm.
good couple whacks at it, and their
Mhm.
whole life changes. And it feels like that's where you were. You had the opportunity to either keep going forward and get into your 3 feet from gold or walking away from it. Was there something that you can identify and share with us that kind of stood out to you during those moments? Because it can be tough going and having this belief, but you're not receiving that so-called monetary reward, but it's still a
Mhm.
reward, in my opinion.
Oh, without a doubt. So to elaborate on what you're saying, 100%. I mean, sometimes men quit right at the cusp, at the borderline. They take one more step and they win, but they die off at the end there. So that's the kind of mentality that I had, where once I said, "Wow, I don't." Somewhere inside of me, one side said, "If you keep on throwing money at this, it may not work." But then my heart and my spirit said, "You know what? You're not a quitter." You know, I believed in it. And the reason that I believed in it so much is because with my very own eyes, I was seeing the emasculation of men across the board. I started doing some deep research. I started connecting with different people through the podcast, and there was energy there. There was connection. There was congruency with that mission, and I believed in it because a lot of people would write me and they would encourage me. And I got to tell you, the first wave of that podcast, without that support, maybe I wouldn't be here today because those people, they really said, "Hey, listen, keep on talking, keep on pushing." My wife was behind me, and my heart, man, like I knew that I needed to have one breakthrough. So for the people that are just about to give up or have a sense of giving up, for me personally, and I only speak for me, um, when I had that feeling, I stopped for a moment and I went very introspective. I started seeing my journey, really understanding my journey to where I was today, and then asking myself, why would I stop now? And I really looked at the future. It's almost like I opened the door and said, you know what? Down the road, 5 years, if you do the right thing now, 5 years, 10 years down the road, you can build something great. And my goal really was to build a brotherhood, right? A brotherhood of men, which is the Man of War Society. And that is a thriving brotherhood, man. That is so powerful, um, that I can't even begin to tell you. And every time that we have our yearly main event and we have all these men come together with their wives, it just reaffirms and confirms, what I'm doing without a doubt. So it's just that extra step, that extra push at the end. I think that makes the difference without a doubt.
No, for sure. And you said something that I definitely want to circle back to in the beginning parts of you building what you've built thus far. Can you talk about how important it is to choose and have the right partner during that process? Uh,
Oh,
as I mentioned to you, I just celebrated 20 years as far as my marriage. I've been with my wife 26 years, and the honest conversation is that we go through many different phases. As young men growing into adult men. I'm almost 50 now, right?
yeah.
So can you kind of speak to that? Because sometimes, there's low points and sometimes there's high points. But talk about the significance of having a great partner while on this type of journey.
I mean, look, you guys have been together 26 years. I've been together with my wife now 23. We will be celebrating our 22nd anniversary actually in about a month.
Wow,
Okay.
congratulations.
Thanks, thanks. I, so, I mean, it's like I really believe that the partner that you are with as a man and the woman that you have chosen, and I hate to say this, and there's a lot of alpha males out there that will go against this and say, nah, you gotta, you're your own man. BS, man. Okay. The person that's standing next to you, that's supporting you, that's looking at you eye to eye, that knows who you really are, that person, are you kidding me? That person has so much weight on your performance, so much influence in how you perform in life, so much. I can't even, because behind every man, there's a good woman, there's a strong woman. Every successful man that I know, there's always a strong woman behind that man. And it's powerful because there's if you choose wisely, you are set up to win. You are set up for success. And it's not just about whether she's pretty and she's nice. It's really you as the man being the leader and choosing, and then you guys coming together in synergy, you know? So that's powerful. So yeah, I mean, it's I would say that it's without a doubt a high priority and tremendous influence, and having an incredible person in your life to back you up and be that strong bone, without a doubt.
No, absolutely. I share the exact same sentiments. I was speaking 2 days ago in Vegas at an event in front of like 600 people. It was a mixed audience in regards to men and women, but I was really talking about the importance of what my wife represented for me because, even every one of my books, right? My wife has read every single book. We
Yeah,
have those deep, thoughtful conversations, and if you don't have the right type of partner around you, believing in you and just kind of being like a cheerleader and pushing you, even when you may doubt yourself at times,
yeah, yeah.
it's invaluable. So I agree 1000%. When it comes to sustaining, right? I guess the philosophy is, you can get $1 million, but can you grow $1 million or sustain $1 million? You hear lottery winners all the time. They win significant amount of money, $80 million, and in 5 years they're broke, and it is because their mindset and mentality. With everything that you're doing, starting in 2017, how have you been able to stay refreshed? How have you been able to sustain? And do you live by certain morals and values and standards? And what are your non-negotiables? I know it's kind of loaded. You kind of attack
No,
whichever one you
yeah.
want. But I would love to know how you operate from that space and how has that been over this period of time.
Yeah, so I'm going to reverse answer that. Okay, so I'm going to start from the last one. And my non-negotiables in life, without a doubt, okay, are first and foremost, and this is something that I do and I've been doing for a lot of years. When I put my 2 feet on the ground every single morning when I wake up. Sometimes, by the way, and it's funny because I was on another podcast earlier today, and they asked me, "Do you have do you have discipline every day of your life, and do you?" Is your whole life perfect discipline? I'm like, are you kidding me, man? Some days I don't want to get up. Some days are like the worst, but guess what? I still get up. I put my 2 feet on the ground and I go do the work. The most important thing for me, non-negotiable, is I give grace and gratitude when I wake up. When those 2 feet come on the ground, I do this, Major, like this right here. Okay. I put my hands together and I say a prayer and I thank God for everything He has given me. I thank God for my kids, for even my challenges. Okay. Even my challenges. And many times I'll even say, even my enemies and people who can't stay. I pray for that. And I give gratitude and I give grace. Right. To me, it's magical. Within a couple of minutes, I get up. I'm feeling in a positive vibe. And that is a non-negotiable for me every day. That's what I do. Another non-negotiable is nighttime. All right. Meaning that I believe that every man should go to bed with a victory. Even if your whole day you've taken loss and punches in the face and you've lost all day, you take that victory with you when you go to bed. And my victory is every night I discipline myself to read at least 5 to 7 pages, sometimes more, of a book. And I make sure that I read. And I've been reading, and this is something that, I say this often, and my wife will tell you, I have never not read one night since I was 13 years old. Let me repeat that again. Since I was 13 years, there hasn't, I was in my COVID deathbed, and I still had a book that I brought with me, okay, and I still read. Okay, so it's just who I am and what I'm about. I look forward to the nighttime to open up a book. I don't sit there on my phone. I open up a book. I put my phone down. I'm out and I open up a book and I read and I enjoy it and I look forward to it. I always love buying books. I have thousands and thousands of books. I have a huge library at home. And that's what I do. That is a non-negotiable for me. That is like, no, it cannot be me if I don't do that. So those two are non-negotiables, and that's how I start and I end.
No, I
Now,
love that.
let me get to refreshing myself. I, I am not the person to take advice from when it comes to refreshing, okay? Because I don't do a really good job, man. I really don't do a good job in my life to refresh enough. And I get told that by a lot of people. Okay. You need to take some time off. I'm just not that, maybe it's the season in my life. I am always go. I'm always go. Now, I will say this, that I have a huge I guess maybe there's a section in my life that many people don't have, and this is why I can continue pushing forward, and that is meditation. Every morning, I meditate. I meditate. I've been practicing Zazen for I don't know what 30 years of my life. Okay, I have a private room area where I have my Zazen, my Safuton, my I sit, and this is I studied Zen Buddhism for many, many years. I was 2 weeks away from being an ordained monk, literally. And because there were some conflicts with my Christianity, I backed away from that. But the physical exercise of sitting meditation, very deep. And that has been a huge part of my life. So I seek refuge in prayer and in meditation. And when I do that, there's a sense of tranquility that carries me through every single day. So while most people are very agitated at times and have high anxiety and definitely high stress and cortisol, I'm not, that's not me. I'm a high wired guy. I execute at a high level, but there's a sense of calmness within me. So I can stretch for real long periods of time without quote unquote feeling refreshed. I have a focus, I have a mission, I'm driven. And what I said the other day, I think I was talking to my son, was look, I'm refreshed every single day in some way, shape, or form, because the fact that I get up and God gives me the opportunity to breathe, man, that's refreshing, you know, to me. That's refreshing. I don't need to
Absolutely.
go on a 2 week vacation, man. I don't know. But that's kind of like where I stand with that. Don't get me wrong though, I do love to sharpen my blade, and I do love to take my wife out for a few days and go to the beach and chill and take the kids on vacation. That's all cool. But um, sometimes I don't even think of that as really refreshing.
Yeah, and I believe that so I'm all about recategorizing certain programs that have been implemented in our lives. So my
Hmm.
whole theme in my framework is called use. So my
Hmm.
books are called Use Everybody. Now the second one is called Use Everybody Again, is because I've
Hmm.
taken a negative connotation and turned it into a positive life force. Because
I
ultimately we
love that.
do use each other, right? So the U
Hmm.
is for unlocking your story, S for shifting your mindset, the E is for executing your strategy. What you just said right now is refreshing. That is a refresh. Some people, the work is the refresh. Some
Hmm.
people, the grind is the actual refresh. Some
Yes.
people have misconstrued what that refresh has to be. And so you just own what your refresh is. If your refresh is just having a motor that's unlike other people's motor,
Hmm.
then that's still your version of your refresh. So I can
Sure.
I can appreciate that
Makes sense.
because I have very similar takes in regards to that as well. So your book, redefining a 21st century man, it challenges cultural norms around masculinity. What is the biggest myth about modern manhood you would like to dismantle?
Well, I think that many people think, and this goes across the board, okay, that a masculine man has to be an axe grinding type of man, that he needs to have washboard six packs and just be, oh, me, Tarzan, you, Jane. So a lot of people that are more refined, look at that and they make fun of guys that want to build masculinity, because then they're like, who, they think they're kind of I don't want to say the word dumb, but not the sharpest guys out there. Okay. And so it's almost like there's a play where people think it's just a bearded, tattooed guy that has an axe and just walks around tough. And that's the farthest from the truth, right? A gentleman warrior, a masculine man in our society, especially now in this day and age, you know, it's a man who lives by a code, a man who really leads from the front and exemplifies across the board, across all facets of his life, high levels of leadership. Um, it is an action taker, right? He's an action taker. He's a man that understands that at any moment, really, his life can be taken from him, but he's willing to step up and do what needs to be done, protecting his family, serving for a higher purpose, right? Executing at high levels, building wealth, right? We get confused a lot of times with um, men who are out there in this battlefield of life nowadays, that you have to choose either to be really in really good shape and be a good fighter and be a good competitive athlete or whatever it may be, but if you choose that route, you're not going to make money, right? And some people think that way. They could only be strong, and with if you're going to be strong, you can't be smart, wise, and an entrepreneur and have that spirit. No, you can be both, guys. You can be both. You can have a nice balance in your life when it comes to, dominating those facets, your relationships in your life, obviously wealth in your life, building your wealth, building a closeness to God and to a higher purpose, being a good father, a good husband, right? Being a good leader, building a company, because men, that's what we do. We build empires. So all this, unfortunately, what we have seen is a turn of the tables, and we've seen women get empowered to a certain level where it's almost like they emasculate men in a way that it's not even talking bad about them, it's saying that we as women don't need men. And you see that across the board. And then you ask yourself, where did that come from? And I'm going to tell you where that comes from. That comes from the man abdicating his role as the king. I mean, in his home. That's it. Like, it's simple. It's they've given the leadership roles to the woman, and they've decided to be the follower. Instead of being the king of the house, your woman as the queen, and you lead and develop that framework within your home. And that is what a masculine man does. But we've lost that in our society. It's literally, I would say, crap. I had a statistic the other day, and I wish I could throw at you. It was in the 70s or 70 something, where men leave the bills to the wife. They leave all this. They let their wife take full leadership across the board, with their finances, with wealth. She works more hours. She makes more money. She, and it's like, I'm sorry, man, but that's not in my book. And in the world of a masculine man, you need to lead from the front. And to answer your question, I guess a little bit more, it's people who see that men are just, the tough, physically fit dudes. There's much more to being a man than that.
No, absolutely. That's a great response. I appreciate that. On the Man of War, you talk about forging resilience in the crucible of challenge. What are the three qualities you believe every leader must cultivate to thrive under pressure, in your opinion?
First one is without a doubt, and this is, I think we get lost in this. When you are, and I put this in a context where it's important to understand that as a leader, you must always praise someone, right? You pass, you're never, um, how do I word this to in the most dynamic way? When you're passing the blame, and I see this all the time, okay, where leaders pass the blame to other people, that is not leadership, right? It's very simple, okay? When you are passing praise to your team, no matter what happens, and then you're taking accountability, okay, that is a beautiful, that there's huge synergy as a leader, right? You're passing that praise, and also when things go wrong, you are taking the blame. You can't point at your team anymore. Okay, so I always talk about passing the credit and owning your failures, right? So you pass the congratulations to your team. So that's leadership 101 right there. And I see that broken in so many chains coming from law enforcement. Oh my goodness. Okay. It's everybody pointing finger at everybody else. All right. The second thing is, and this is probably, again, something that is missing in our society. If you can't lead yourself out of an open door, how do you expect to lead anybody else? Right? I mean, think about that, right? I mean, that's it's a simple mathematic equation. You can't lead you, you can't lead other people.
Right.
So that's a big, huge deal right there. Where we're missing that, where you have the sloppy leaders out there, just out of shape mentally, physically. They don't have anything together. Okay, and finally, the third one is prioritization across the board. What are your priorities? Too many men that are leaders get caught in the mushmash, in the mishmash. They get caught in the noise. Okay. You have to prioritize and structure your life in a way where you deal with your priorities urgently, quickly, and effectively. And then you start deprioritizing things that are not going to be of value to you at all. Because unfortunately, what we tend to do a lot of times is we, as leaders, all of us go through difficulties, but we tend to do the easy things first. I always talk about killing Goliath early in the morning. I believe that Goliath should be the most difficult thing, or your most difficult task should be done earlier in the day. After noontime, we as human beings have we start dropping, right? Because it's just the way it's the cycle. I mean, that's our sleeping patterns. I believe between 5 a.m. and 10 a.m. are the prime of the prime for someone to be sharp. There's been studies on this, and so between those hours, man, that's where you should be focusing. So structure, prioritization, and that's critical. Those are the three main things that when I look at a leader that shine and make a, they're right there in front of me.
No, those make sense. Doing what you do when it comes to mentorship, how has that process been, or how have you grown in the process of mentoring men? Obviously, people come in with their own baggage, their own trauma, their own perspective of the world. But at some point, they got to a point where they feel like they needed that extra help, or you've added some value that they were attracted to. How have you grown in your mentorship, and how has it been when people kind of reject it and end up having that aha moment with you? How has that
Yeah,
transition been?
that's a great question, by the way. Good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. So if you spoke to me 8 years ago, 9 years ago, it would be a different type of conversation, different energy. Okay. As I have grown more into my position of my leadership position, um, what I have realized more than anything is that stories, the way you tell a story, can make such a difference in communication that you can go to Harvard and learn all these fancy words in delivering something. Won't even come close to the ability to tell a powerful story where people can really connect with and resonate with. So that is the main thing right there for me. The ability I've really tried to learn how to tell stories, how to communicate with stories. And that has been where if I was touching lives in the past by being a certain way and being more direct, and now I have shifted probably the last 2, 3 years to much more story, experience based, um, leadership style, and people just resonate, and people just believe it's more authentic, it's more transparent. There's power in that. So for me, it has absolutely everything to do with being able to be able to tell stories. But I will say something. Being in narcotics undercover for so many years, um, everything was secretive in my life, right? I didn't want people to know where I lived. I didn't want people to know. I mean, so my face wasn't able to be out there like it. So it was. It took a while. It took a while for me to be able to tell stories of my experiences and open up. That was a big process, but I think that I'm doing a lot better nowadays.
No, absolutely. And I'm always, curious about that evolution, right? Especially coming from your background and the psychology of that as well, because it's a huge adjustment. Let's take it back. And I don't want to take too much of your time, but let's take it back real quick because I want to know your upbringing in regards to if you came up um, in an environment that had money or you guys didn't have money versus to where you are now and how you parent your kids. So me personally, just to give you context, I grew up in the projects, single parent household, mom on welfare for 20 years. But
Yep.
something within me always felt like I didn't belong in that area. And so I used sports to
Yep.
transcend me out of the area. Like at 13, 14, 15 years old, started a lawnmower company, a lawnmower business, which I didn't know was a lawnmower business. I just had a lawnmower. Someone offered me
Yep.
20 bucks. I said, let me
Mhm.
do it for the next person, right?
Sure. Sure.
So I use those different things indirectly, subconsciously to get myself out of that environment, right?
Mhm.
So now that I've done the things that I've done in this world, obviously my kids have a different view of the world and they've had a different transition. They have a different life.
Right.
And giving my kids edge in sports, I had to redirect my storytelling abilities
Yeah.
versus you should just feel it because this is how it
Yeah.
is to compete,
Yeah,
as a man.
for sure.
So how is that transition? How did you grow up? But also, how did you transition being where you are now with cultivating great kids?
Well, first I want to say I love your story, man. Where you stepped up and you changed your life. You you refused to be average. And you stepped it up, and I wish a lot of young men and guys our age, to see you and to use you as an example. So I love your story. For me, my parents were, they're immigrants from Cuba. They came here in the early 60s to Miami. And they got married. I was young, probably about 2 years old when my father started studying medicine in Spain. So a lot of my childhood was in Spain. I can tell you that the word poor is probably accurate. Okay, even though my mom doesn't ever like to hear that word, they don't like to hear that because they did put food on the table, whether it was white rice and eggs, whatever, but everybody had food. My father, he is he's still around, and I'm blessed that he's still around. But what I can say, my parents, I mean, we came up from a, very, very low um, socioeconomic class. Um, my parents weren't like that. My mom came from a very wealthy family in Cuba. I mean, my grandparents, but they came down here and everything was swiped from them. So they started, so it was a tough process growing up. I mean, what I mean by tough, I'm talking about, I didn't have everything that all the other kids had, around me when it came to material things, whatever, but I did have the love and the caring. So we were always a very strong, strong family. My father, he basically, I mean, he took leadership of our family, and good man across the board. It's taught me everything I need to know about family, even to this day. Family first, period. End of story. There is nothing more important than family. And, from a perspective of business, not the greatest businessman in the world. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of things that I learned not to do. But the love for family, my father taught me everything, and an incredible man across the board. So, my background started, it was like that. Now, how did I come to this level where we started building wealth? And when I went into Wall Street, it was from a friend of mine that just said, "Hey, come check this out." The next thing I know, I'm walking into a huge office, Italian dude sitting there, and they're saying, "Hey, look at these Ferraris and Mercedes and Lamborghinis back here. Do you want to own one of those?" And I said, yeah. And then the next thing you know, I started working, worked myself up on Wall Street to very, very high levels. And then I got a taste of it. I got a taste of money. I got a taste of what it is to live that luxurious lifestyle. And then something came to me, and 9/11 happened, and the next thing you know, I'm like, I need to serve for something more meaningful. So I went literally from making 700 to $800,000 a year to making $34,000 a year as a cop. That was my journey, man. And it was like I went from the top all the way down to the bottom. I mean, I had repossessions, foreclosures. I can't even tell you the difficulties that I had when I first left Wall Street. And that's a whole different podcast, man. I went through all these trials and tribulations, and finally, getting out the other side to where I am today. It's been a blessing. It's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of risk, a lot of time and effort. But that was God's plan, and I'm better for it.